It's great to be back for the second year in a row. Probably always one of the harshest audiences, perhaps, for a politician to stand in front of when, this is your day in, day out, bread and butter in terms of how we project ourselves in our city. So, no marking of my homework after the next 10 minutes. But I wanted really just to come along to take the opportunity not just to thank this event for being in Manchester, but to kick off by thanking the many of you that I know have been great and avid champions of what we've been doing in our city. When we look at the location of the sector across the country, it comes as no surprise that we've seen significant growth here in the city of Manchester. So it's fantastic to have this event here, and I look forward to some of the feedback that we'll get throughout the sessions around what more we can do as a city to really tap into some of the successes that we're already seeing. So my job really is just to give you a bit of context, a little bit of a sense as to where we find ourselves, not just here in Manchester, but across the north as a whole. And particularly for those of you from Manchester, it won't take too much of me trying to tell you what's so good about our city and why we're so optimistic about our growth trajectory in the years to come. But I'll do a little bit of that anyway. Because I actually think that some of the power in what we're achieving here in the city around our economic growth and our opportunities for residents is rooted in the story and how we tell the story of our city here in Manchester. So if you rewind 20 years ago and you think about the Manchester of 20 years ago, when much of our skill and talent was leaving the city region to go and find opportunity elsewhere, when we were a city that was grappling with struggling where our economic opportunities would be in the future, you wouldn't have imagined that I'd be standing here today talking to you about the £5 billion GVA and growing creative, digital and creative sectors that will continue to thrive in our region. Or I wouldn't be talking to you about the £8 billion GVA economy, advanced materials and manufacturing, or the internationally significant cluster of life sciences, or the work that we've been doing in financial and professional services that have seen one of the largest fintech economies in Europe right here on our doorstep. I probably wouldn't have realistically been talking to you about a city that's grown in creative and cultural confidence, typified by venues like this here in home, but also with other recent additions like Factory International at Aviva Studios, playing into the real strengths that we've had in our creative sector for some time. But that hasn't happened by accident. That's happened with the ingredients of a plan that have been knitted together. And I'll come on to what I think our opportunities in the future are. But that's been essentially 2 decades worth of hard graft. And for those of you that work in and around the city, you've known that we've had to bang the drum and tell our own story many times over to be able to become that self-fulfilling prophecy of a city that continues to grow. And you think about the differences between then and now, and you think about a population that's grown in over 200,000 people just in and around the centre of Manchester, in the city of Manchester alone. You think of a city centre where round about the year of 2000, there's about 800 people lived in the city centre. That's projected to top 100,000 in coming years. But the bit that we don't always talk about enough, really, is what we've done in a city to connect those opportunities into our residents and into our populations. So thinking about those 20 years ago when a quarter of our adults of working age had no formal skills or qualifications living in the city, and fast forwarding to now, where that number's down to 6%. Or back then when our schools were sadly some of the worst in the country, to more schools being good or outstanding and more kids achieving at national average or above for GCSE than ever before here in the city. So when we lean into being confident about the future, it is backed up by a significant amount of work that we've done in previous years. But that isn't to say that there isn't a lot to be excited about, I think, in the coming years. And we all know some of the challenges out there. We all know some of the economic challenges of doing business and investing business. And that's why it was great to see last year Manchester remaining one of the top spots in Europe for foreign and direct investment coming into our city. Or we continue to see that growth in numbers of businesses that are booming right here, from startups to some of the international relocations that we've had. And in the last 12 months alone, we've been bolstered and boosted by seeing continued growth from those that were in the city, like the Bank of New York, that are choosing to base much of their tech and their cyber focus right here in Manchester, through to the continued expansion of companies at a global scale like Roku or Cloud Imperium that have really helped, I think, punch an international way. Or we see brand alignment with the likes of Puma recently. Only a week or so ago, announced they'd be moving the UK headquarters from London to Manchester. So it does feel that there's a lot of energy that's being backed up, and not just me coming here and talking to you about how great it was that Lonely Planet said we were a lovely place to visit, or The Economist does this fantastic report every year about the most exciting cities to live in, or that the New York Times keeps raving about what it is to be in and around Manchester. It's actually backed up with numbers. And it's one of the reasons, when I think about the opportunity of what we're doing here in the city, that I think we're starting to become so attractive to the current government, looking as to where they can find the answers to solving the UK's problems of economic growth. You know, if I think about Manchester and our levels of growth here in the city region, fastest growing UK city, at a consistent rate of anywhere between 2.1 to 2.9% growth every single year in terms of GVA, that speaks to our point about there being some untapped potential right here in northern cities that can really help get the UK's economy back on track. So it'll come as no surprise that we're working really closely with colleagues in government around Invest 2035, the UK's plan for their industrial strategy to really lean in to some of those sectors that are doing well, or the fact that it was Manchester that Pat McFadden from the Cabinet Office chose to come to today to talk about the growth in government jobs outside of London, where he was literally across the road in First Street looking at the evolution of the civil servant's presence here in Manchester, but also leading to the exciting opportunity that we've been talking about for some time in Central Retail Park, which was known. So those of you from Manchester, you'll remember the old Toys R Us and what's since been a very sad, derelict car park. I won't say too much because Sarah Lester's here from the MEN. And what it's likely to do is restart that story about why I can't turn it into a park. And surely I could put some more trees on it. But actually what we're trying to do is get 7,000 government jobs with a real specialism on digital, cyber and AI. And don't panic, there still will be a park that will built on that. But tomorrow I'm launching Ancoats Green, which is a significant investment into parks and green spaces in that bit of the city. So it does feel like there's a bit of energy around leaning into business growth. You look at our skyline, the residential numbers are beginning to not just kind of outstrip other cities, but show that despite the cost of borrowing and despite access to capital, it still can be done. We're also seeing right across the city, from occupation rates at places like St John's or First Street, areas that have been developing from some time, but also energy around new plans for bits in and around the city centre, from the edge of Ancoats in Holt Town, thinking through to Noma and the growth out Victoria North, one of the largest urban regeneration programmes in Europe. But I want to just spend the last minute or two talking a bit about where we need you to come in as a sector and as businesses that have a presence in our city, because we know that there's still a lot of opportunities that we could tap into. We know that we still need to do more in the space of our skills and talent and connecting local residents across the city region into the opportunities that we're creating right here on our doorstep. That's one of the reasons that we launched last year our brokerage service for businesses that do want to engage with skills, but want to make sure that you're in the right skills. For businesses that want to have meaningful engagement over a period of time, not just tapping in, going in and showing an 11-year-old how wonderful the world could be and then dipping out, but proper meaningful engagement. So if you're interested in that, and if you're interested into reaching in to creating more skills and opportunities for future generations, do contact us. There's obviously also a lot of work we've been doing around transport. So I think you will have had to have lived in a bubble if you've not cottoned on to the yellow buses and our Mayor Andy's obsession with getting all the buses running on time. But actually, that's a bigger picture. We know we can do more in the transport and connectivity phase. And actually today, Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham are in London making a pitch to government around the Northern Arc, an opportunity to see an extra £90 billion go into the economy by 2040 by investing in faster connectivity, beginning with Manchester to Liverpool, but harnessing on the opportunity of reaching across to Leeds and to Sheffield, and then building our better connections into the north. We also need a bit of help from some of you in the room to help continue to bang that drum. And then I guess the final message for me is that there's something distinctly Mancunian about how we go about this. I don't ever, as leader, stand up on a national or international stage and tell you all that's wrong with my city. And that doesn't mean that I don't know that there's plenty that need doing. You know, on many metrics, we're in the wrong direction when it comes to child poverty, when it comes to access to opportunity. As a local authority, we're consistently, sadly, the fifth, the sixth most deprived local authority in the country. But the Mancunian way is not for me to stand up and tell you how crap life is and everyone has a hard life and everyone lives in poverty and there's nothing good going on here. The Manchester way is always put your best suit on, go out on the global stage and sell all that's good about Manchester. So never mistake that for us not being open and honest and upfront about the things we want to change. But hopefully, over the course of the day, you'll get a real sense of genuine optimism about what we can do here in the north of England. Because too long, we've been looked at entirely the wrong way. Places like Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, places like Oldham and Wakefield have been looked at places that would always take away from the UK's pot of money rather than add to. What we're saying and the opportunity to do business across the north is completely changing that narrative. We're consistently one of the world's most centralised countries with some of the highest levels of regional disparities and inequalities that you find across OECD countries. We want to shift that. So the optimism, the at times slight overconfident nature of the Manchester style, some may say cocky, is about trying to rechange some of that narrative and setting ourselves on our own path. Because where we've got to hasn't been with significant government assistance or investment. It's because people, from business through to public sector institutions, through to politicians, have said that actually places like Manchester can be better, and they should be better, and they should be underpinned by a national economic and redistributive strategy that does that. So hopefully you'll take some of that energy away from today. And if you haven't already been banging the drum of Manchester and the wider north, you'll feel even more energised. The next time someone flies in and says, well, actually, shall we have that meeting in London because that's where it's at? Say, no, well, what about Manchester? What about Leeds? What about Liverpool? Let's show you what the UK has got to offer more broadly. So great to see you all today. Hope you have a fantastic afternoon. And please do enjoy some of the Manchester sunshine as well. So thank you.